gentlemen. Welcome to yet another episode of our weekly investor forum. I'm your host, Dan Theok, Senior Vice President of Investment Banking. And today we'll be looking at the Q2 results for WIGTON Wind Farm Limited. And we have joining us none other than the CEO for WIGTON, Gary Beryl, who's here to tell us all about it. Welcome, Gary. How are you doing?
Very well, and thanks for having me again, Dan. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Always a pleasure to have you, and we'll get that name change mentioned very quickly in short order. We're also joined by our CEO, Patrick Batelli. Patrick, welcome.
Thank you, Dan.
Well, welcome everybody. I'd like to, as usual, remind you guys to hit the button to share this video if you like it. And if you haven't yet, remember to subscribe and hit the bell to receive all future notifications because we upload content just like this, just about once per week. Also, it's about that time that you embarked on your very first investment journey. Patience wins the investment game, not speed. That means the earlier you get started, the better. Why not take that first step with Mayberry Investments Limited? Follow us on social media today to get started. And don't forget, at the end of the segment, we'll have a Q&A section, so please feel free to submit your questions, and we'll get to them at the end. I already see some coming in from Philip and Endless Podcast. Thanks for that, guys. So let me tell you a little bit about Gary Beryl. He has over 30 years experience in telecoms and the electric industries in the region. In addition to his business experience, he has a multiple disciplinary background in engineering, finance, technology, innovation, business transformation, process reengineering, governance, and people management. He's all that, believe it. Prior to joining WIGTON, Gary served as Chief Operating Officer at GPS, where he led enterprise-wide strategic planning and executed some of the game-changing projects in their digital transformation and other business innovations. Gary holds a Bachelor of Science degree in engineering, a Master of Business Administration, which he completed, and he's completed the global development programs with INSEAD in countries such as France, UK, China, Spain, and the USA. Gary did over 10 years at GPS, and I did about 7 of them with him. He's a great guy. And he was even longer at Cable and Wireless. Great guy. Great to have you on board at WIGTON. He's been there since May. Once again, welcome, Gary. It's really great to have you on board.
Thank you again, Dan. And let me also use the opportunity to welcome Mayberry's investment new CEO, Patrick.
Thanks. And Gary, let's get it right. What's the correct new name for WIGTON Wind Farm Limited?
Yes, I'm really so excited that you asked that question, Dan. As you know, we had actually changed the trading name to WIGTON Energy from WIGTON Wind Farm. And I'm pleased to announce that we have actually now, just last week, changed a registered name from WIGTON Wind Farm to WIGTON Energy. And this, I think, is a significant signal to the market that this is an organization that is going through significant change and that it won't only be about wind going forward, but also more, we'll be carrying a more diversified portfolio of products and services. And we'll get to that a little later.
Absolutely. And we look forward to jumping into the Q2 results, talking a little bit about that, and then talking in general about the future of WIGTON Energy. So let me start by declaring the conflicts, and many there are. So Mayberry Investments, through its subsidiary MJE, is one of the largest shareholders in WIGTON. So I want to get that out of the way. We're the top 10 shareholder for sure. I also happen to be a board director on WIGTON. I'm sort of Mayberry's representative, but for all intents and purposes, Gary, I am just an investment analyst today looking at the numbers. So please address me accordingly. And I think we'll have a great time. Folks, I think you're going to have a great time too when we look at the numbers. So guys, if we could bring up the numbers, we want to look at the half-year results for September 2024. And I'll start by saying there was a Beryl impact, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But despite that Beryl impact, I want you to take notice that the revenues were $1 billion for the half year, about 5% lower than the same period last year. But through good control of cost of sales, which are down 13%, the gross profit was actually up by 3% to 572 million J for the half year. Additionally, general and administrative expenses were up 11% to $387.3 million. and the operating profit was up 47% to $600 million. Finance costs, because they're paying down the loans, some of them were down by 13% to $182 million. So that's a good thing. And the profit before tax is up a whopping 121% to $413 million. However, last year, because they had to change in the taxation regime from 33% to 25%, we got special treatment there, which is the way it should have been from day one. There was a huge reversal of taxation charge last year. So last year we had taxation income of $317.6 million, whilst this year we have taxation expense, the way it should be, of $103.2 million. So net, the net profit for the year is $309.8 million as compared to $504 million for the same period last year. But again, I noted that last year had that sort of unusual taxation adjustment. Total assets, 10.27 billion, are down 4% because of the impact of depreciation with no significant capital expenditure in the last 12 months. And we'll talk a little bit about that because there are at least two significant projects that should be huge drivers of capex for the business going forward, and we certainly look forward to those two projects here. We'll talk about that in a second. Total equity is up by 10% to $5.4 billion, driven primarily by the $300 million in profits for this half year. And then I do want to note that WIGTON's sitting down on almost $4 billion of cash. So they are ready for the next two capital expenditure projects. There's no doubt about that. And the business has very low level of leverage, really underlevered. And so that places them in a great place for expansion. Looking at the key market stats, share price is at 105. The price to earnings ratio is 18 times because trailing earnings is down to $644 million. We'll talk a little bit about the future income earning potential of WIGTON. So it is trading a little bit rich at 17 times in a main market where I'd like to think the Harmine mean average PE is about 10 times. So trading a little bit rich, but for good reason. And by the time we're finished, I think you guys will appreciate. Price to books only 2.2 times. And as I said, trailing earnings $645 million for the last 12 months. Total market cap $11.55 billion. So $11.5 billion market cap, but they're sitting down on $4 billion cash, which when released will help drive earnings substantially. Next slide shows the profitability by quarters, and we've seen some variation. So again, we mentioned the huge tax adjustment in Q2 2024, and that's why that profit for the quarter had spiked to $35 million. We saw a $13 million loss in Q3 2024. That's the last quarter before the end of last year where they made some huge depreciation adjustments because WIGTON Phase One had come to the end of its life. And there were some subsequent adjustments thereafter in the following quarter when they got the 3-year extension to WIGTON Phase One. So that explains the sort of variation in profitability. I would like to see this business ultimately as an analyst getting up to about $1 billion in profitability per annum, which is about $250 million per quarter. And we'll talk a little bit about, is that possible and when can we expect to see WIGTON getting onto that kind of track. Next slide shows the movement in the stock price. And so WIGTON is one of few stocks this year that's up about 40%, started the year, around about 70 cents, and now it's at, roughly $1.05. So it's shown good growth year to date. And why might that be, you might ask? There are a few things. For one, we had the announcement of WIGTON sort of being one of two pre-selected awardees in relation to the government 100 megawatt RFP, and we'll talk a little bit about that. WIGTON was announced as one of the awardees for 50 megawatts, and that's before the GPE, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And I've seen that already pop up as one of the questions from Limitless Podcast. So Gary will talk a little bit about that 50 megawatt pre-awarded bid and where we are with that, where do we expect that to move along. Additionally, the 10% cap, government had a sort of special cap on the maximum share ownership of the business, which went away on the 5-year anniversary from WIGTON being listed. So that went away roughly in May 2024. So there's no longer that restriction. And I believe at the AGM, WIGTON took steps to remove the golden share that the government had to prevent the business from allowing anybody to own more than 10%. Certain other restrictions that came along with that. So we definitely are expecting to see, you know, a new majority shareholder at some point in time turning up for WIGTON. We think the business has great potential and is an attractive um, acquisition opportunity to somebody who's serious about renewables. And we know Jamaica has this huge outlook for renewables, right? The idea that they wanted to get to 50% renewable by 2030, which is practically impossible at this point in time. And I'm going to say that as an analyst because it would probably require about 300, 400 megawatts of renewables to come onto the grid. This 100 megawatts, we've been talking about it for, you know, 3-4 years, still taking rather long. And then there's another 168 megawatts thereabouts that there should be an RFP for that any day now. I mean, I'm really expecting that to come before the end of the current government fiscal year. But if we can't get this first 100 out of the way, how are we going to get on to the second 168? So we have a lot of work to do by virtue of renewables if we're to get anywhere near the 2030 target, which was originally 30%, and then it was adjusted to 50%, if my memory serves me well, by the Prime Minister himself. So we got a lot of work to do to get there, and WIGTON is really poised with 62 megawatts of renewables today, the largest IPP, I think, in English-speaking Caribbean, certainly one of the longest serving one, being there for over 20 years. They're definitely poised, $4 billion of cash, great expertise, great management in place. They're certainly poised, we think, to win more substantial positions as the government rolls out those RFPs. So with that, that's my sort of quick review of the business. Just to summarize again, half-year profit of about $309 million. There was some Beryl impact on that. And, you know, I'm hopeful to see the business, certainly after implementing any of the new projects on stream, getting up to $1 billion of profitability in the next year or two. Okay, so Patrick, why don't I allow you to, you know, ask the first question?
Sure. Thanks, Dan. So, Gary, can you elaborate on the factors that contributed to the 12.9 increase in total revenue?
Yeah, sure, Patrick. And certainly, as you know, wind is our primary source of revenue. And the wind regime for the first quarter has been really good, much better than it was last year. So in the first quarter up to June 2024, we had a 24.4% increase in wind over the previous year. And overall, for the first 6 months against the same period last year, we have about a 16% improvement in the wind. And that's the major source of our revenue and a major contributing factor. I should, however, mention, Patrick, that in that period we had Hurricane Beryl, and it did have some impact on our production and the availability of a number of our turbines. But you know, I'm happy to say that we are adequately insured for business interruption as well as damage insurance, and so we actually have a provision included in our accounts of about $239 million, which is reflected in the overall sales figure, overall revenues being well above what last year was.
Good deal. And we saw that disclosure in the interim financials, Gary. And so the idea here is you have a deductible, both a limit, a period, a time, and this is your insurance provision after taking those deductibles into consideration.
That is correct for the business interruption in particular. Okay. There's a 10-day deductible period.
Great. And what is your position today post Beryl? 1 and 2, can you confirm that you didn't have any challenges associated with this tropical storm that just passed through?
All right. Let me answer the last question first, because you know that would have been the thing that would have kept us awake. But no, we're very pleased. We had one trip on one of the transmission lines, but that was momentarily, and we're able to bring back the turbines very quickly online. Of course, you can imagine that the passage of Raphael was such that it was advantageous to us in this case. and we're able to get a lot of wind regime beyond what we would have planned. As far as post Beryl is concerned, you know, we have had a team that has worked, you know, 24/7 to get the turbines back up. We did have some damage, particularly on the older turbines, which would be the WIGTON Phase One turbines. And we worked with the suppliers. We worked with, you know, our team at Rosehill. I really have to give them a shout out. You know, they worked throughout the night. We had some additional help that we brought in. And today we are just about back to where we were in terms of availability and production. We're at about 90% right now. There's a single turbine that had in WIGTON 2 that had some blade damage, and that blade has been shipped, so we are waiting the arrival of that blade. But generally speaking, we are just about back to normal. There are a few turbines where we have some intermittent problems, but for the most part, they are up and running. So I'm really very pleased with where we are right now, post Beryl.
Hey, good deal. And I'm looking at a picture of the turbine in the background behind you, and it just sort of sparks my thoughts, my memory. And it's difficult to appreciate how big these things are. And so the 2 megawatt units that you have in like phase 2 and 3, Gary, can you give us like a feel for how big they are? In the back of the picture there, it looks really small behind your head. But
yes, I'm telling you, when I joined WIGTON, I mean, I was pretty surprised when I had my first tour of the facilities. You know, when you look at these pictures, you have no idea of how large these turbines are. And in fact, when you see the turbines spinning, you think they're actually spinning slow, but by the time they get down to where the generator is and the ratios that bring down the gears to a certain level, they're spinning pretty quickly. I don't have the exact size right now, but it is really something to behold. After the hurricane, they were actually doing some repairs, and I was looking at some drone shots of some of the team members actually in the nacelle, which is the sort of top part of the turbine that contains most of the electronic stuff, including the generator. And the workers were small compared with the size of the nacelle. I mean, that is where really when you get a perspective of how large they are.
Yep, I appreciate that. I want to say the tower is like 50 meters and the diameter of the blade is probably 25 or 30 meters. It's pretty big. So folks, you need to appreciate that these aren't little things. These are huge structures, multi-million-dollar structures, in fact. And so I'm really happy to hear that there was no damage coming out of this most recent guy, and that you actually caught some wind. Hey, Patrick, any other question from you by chance?
Sure, Dan. So, Gary, I know we talked a bit about the revenue. Can you elaborate on some of the details around the 4.3% decrease in expenses?
Okay, sure, Patrick. So, you may know that WIGTON 1 has really, which consists of just about 23 turbines, have come to the end of its useful life. And as a result, we would see that the depreciation associated with phase 1 has fallen off significantly. We got a 3-year extension. So from an accounting point of view, we were able to take the last year's depreciation and spread it over the 3 years. So that would have reflected a significant reduction in depreciation, which is a part of the expenses. And added to that is just really prudent expense management by the team on the ground, as well as the support team here at the head office. Going forward, you know, one of our pillars going forward, strategic pillars, is just really being brilliant at the basics. And this means that we are going to be reviewing all our systems, all our processes. We're going to be putting in the best technology to ensure that we minimize costs and that the efficiency is optimized. So I'm, really very optimistic that we'll be able to contain and manage costs while we grow by putting in the best and latest technology.
Thank you. So one other follow-up question I have. I know we talked about the repowering of WIGTON Phase One. Can you elaborate on some of the benefits that we'll get from that?
Okay, so the WIGTON one's technology is fairly old now. A lot of the technology is obsolete. We have more efficient technology, both in terms of the initial cost, in terms of maintenance, overall efficiency, and technology capabilities. So, the Jamaican consumer will be able to benefit from, putting in these new technologies. At this point in time, we are still looking at options in terms of, the combination of technologies, the locations that we're going to be using. We're still going through the design phase and also speaking with our financiers in terms of, the debt financing to support the rebuilding of the WIGTON one's capacity. And that is moving along very quickly. We are in discussion with the various stakeholders to ensure that, and we're aiming to have this completed within the next 2 years.
Great. So to be specific, Gary, and thanks for that, Patrick, I want to follow up on that myself. So WIGTON Phase One's a 20.7 megawatt PPA, power purchase agreement, that expired in March of this year. And I think you guys got like a 3-year extension to continue operating it from the OER, JPS, whatever. And so you've got this window to get the replacement done. And, my general understanding is, that technology, as you said, is quite old. Those turbines were like 0.75 megawatts. Phase 2 or 2 megawatts. And the newer technologies we're looking at are at a minimum maybe 4 megawatts. But additionally, I believe you guys are also in talks with the government about potentially replacing that renewable, i.e. wind, with maybe a combination of solar going forward. And I believe there's an opportunity to get those tariffs down substantially if that were to be approved. Is that generally correct?
Yes, I mean, our approach is that we'd rather to be technology agnostic. Our primary objective is to get tariffs as low as possible using renewable energy. So, of course, we believe in clean, green energy. We believe in building a sustainable Jamaica, but doing so at a price that is lower than the conventional sources of energy. And we believe that there are various technologies that are available to achieve that objective now, have different price points. So we are looking at the various options that will allow for the lowest tariffs to our consumers.
Yeah, great. And just following up on that, Gary, I mean, you and I have both been in the T&D business, and now you're in the generation business alone. So again, folks, when I say the numbers, I'm very cautious. It is what it is. But the last tariff I want to say for WIGTON Phase One was about 10 cents per kilowatt hour US. You guys just put in a bid for solar. It's public information, and I want to say that tariff's roughly 7 cents, so like 30% cheaper. And so, in my mind, there's a world where the generation cost that you're bringing to the table could be 30% cheaper, which people of Jamaica will benefit from completely. Of course, there's a T&D cost that GPS has to recover as well. But the idea here is there's a potential to get the generation cost down by 30%, which I'm very excited about. Tell me now, WIGTON. So you guys. So you're in discussions, advanced discussions about Phase One. That's great. The 50 megawatt pre-award that you received, what's the latest with that, Gary? What can you tell us about that? And I'll accredit that question to Limitless Podcast, although we had it here ourselves. What's the latest and greatest story in relation to the 50 megawatt that you're waiting on the GPE, Generation Procurement Entity, to sort of finalize?
So as you know, Dan, we are one of two companies that was selected through the financial evaluation by the GPE. So we were pre-awarded. The second stage would be from a technical evaluation perspective. We have been in discussions with the GPE. We have answered, all of the questions that have been asked. We continue to feel very confident that we will be ultimately awarded. And as it is right now, we don't have a specific date for an announcement by the GPE. In the meantime, however, we are working with our stakeholders, our technology partners, looking at land acquisition, we're looking at the technology designs, and we are already engaging potential financiers. So we are moving ahead as if, we have gotten it, because we want to be sure that once the announcement takes place, that we are ready to start the project immediately. So we remain very optimistic. We expect to hear something very soon, but I can't tell you specifically when the formal announcement will take place.
Got it, got it. And then just to help folks in the general public, so the idea would be, let's just, if you were to be, finally awarded end of November, you probably would still need another 12 months to be able to actually effect this project, right? You've got a PPA that you need to negotiate, an EPC contract that you need to finalize, equipment to be ordered, to be installed, etc. So it's not going to happen in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, right? You're probably talking about maybe 12 months.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of things to be done in the meantime in terms of contracts, PPA. I mean, there's a process going through with the single off-taker, with the OER being issued a generation license. So there are a number of steps.
Yeah.
NEPA approvals, environmental approvals, and so forth. But that is why we are sort of trying to get ahead of the game.
Right.
12 months perhaps is a typical time, but internally we are aiming to actually get going on the ground within 9 months.
Okay, excellent. All right, we really look forward to that. So to the various regulators, move fast. I beg you. And so, Gary, we know there's an intention to do another RFP, right? There's another bid that we're expecting. It soon come. That's what I'm told in Jamaica. It soon come. It soon come. And that's for approximately 168 megawatts. Any feel updates or sense as to when that's likely to happen?
Sorry, no. We are ready and we are waiting.
Yeah.
We're ready to respond to that. And I'll just say, generally speaking, that the way WIGTON Energy has positioned itself, any of the new requests coming from the GPE for additional generation, we are going to be in there. We're going to be in there aggressively. Our intention is to continue to be the largest renewables company in Jamaica. And certainly we'll continue to be the largest wind facility in the Caribbean. And we want to double, triple that in terms of capacity and associated revenues. So utility scale investment is a critical part of our investment strategy going forward.
Very good. And in general terms, are you comfortable throwing out a sort of a big ballpark figure around, what's it going to cost project-wise to put up 50 megawatts?
At this point in time, we are still talking to some of our technology partners.
Yep.
And because we don't have a signed contract yet, I don't want to actually, give out the ballpark figure at this point in time.
But it's certainly north of $30 million, right? This is it's a big
project.
project.
It's a big project.
It's certainly a big project. And folks, to help you with perspective, because I get this question all the time, WIGTON's a company that, let's say it does $600 million profitability a year from 62 megawatts. This is a 50 megawatt project. So just to give you a sense, folks, there's no reason why WIGTON's profitability can't grow by 80% coming out of this one project. And then another question to you, Gary. Do you guys have the capacity, financial capacity, technical capacity, and throughput if the government of Jamaica, for instance, were to put out another bid in March would you have the capacity to handle building out the new 50 megawatts as well as bidding and perhaps executing on a second 50 megawatt project?
Yes, Dan. So, as you mentioned, our balance sheet is extremely good. We are in a very good leveraged position. We're traded on the stock exchange. We're a very profitable organization with very capable people. We have some very good technology partners. So for the engineering, procurement, and construction, EPC, we believe we have some really good partners, and we're talking to other partners right now. So we believe that, where we have any gaps within the organization, we can find it. We believe that certainly initial discussions, preliminary discussions with the banks, suggest that, they are really very, very favorable in terms of, the financing capabilities and rates and so on and so forth. So we are really very optimistic. As I said, if any gaps exist, we will find it. That is our position. We'll find a way to fill it.
Excellent. So obviously we got two big projects you're going to focus on over the next 12 months, but could you tell us some of the other key strategic priorities that you're going to focus on, Gary, over the next 12 months?
Oh, certainly. So, we had recently had a strategic retreat with the board. We somewhat recalibrated our strategic focus, and we have put them, I want to say, neatly into 5 buckets. The first bucket I would have alluded to earlier was just being brilliant at the basics, which is really to introduce new systems, updated systems, review our systems, review our processes to really get additional efficiencies from the systems. I mean, our ultimate goal in that area is to be a center of operational excellence where other renewable energy companies actually come to Jamaica to visit to see how well run an organization is from an efficiency point of view. The second pillar is growth through diversification. And as you know, we are primarily a wind farm now. We have signaled to the market that that will no longer be the norm going forward. If you think about it, Dan, once we get that 50 megawatts and we decommission WIGTON 1, we could be in a position where our portfolio is, as far as wind is concerned and solar is concerned, is pretty mixed and pretty even. Our objective is really to just lead the green energy revolution in Jamaica and indeed in the Caribbean. A particular market that we're going to be focusing on is the commercial and industrial customers. And we have already brought on additional skills and capabilities in the form of a chief commercial officer who will be focusing on that particular sector industry. And that is one of the areas outside of utilities scale opportunities. That is one of the areas that we are planning significant growth in going forward. And the third, of course, is that we have to recognize that we have really been a wind operations type of organization. And it means that going forward, we're going to have to be more agile. We're going to have a competitive mindset. And so we're going to be retraining our staff. We're going to be introducing or infusing new skills into the organization. We have just recently hired HR officer who is going to help us with the engagement process and with the development process. So that we are really very excited about. The fourth pillar is we're going to be repositioning the brand. We have never really had the market before at WIGTON. That is going to change, and it's going to change very, very quickly. You would have started to see some signs of that happening, no pun intended. We have put up a number of billboards in Kingston, just showing that, certainly a new brand and a new direction for WIGTON going forward. Very soon, you're going to be seeing greater presence on TV, in the media, and it's just really repositioning WIGTON to take advantage of the opportunities that the technology in the green arena is really affording us. And I mean, our objective really, at the end of the day, the large objective is really to build a Caribbean and really a Jamaica and a Caribbean, making it a happier and greener place for tomorrow. And of course, we're going to focus on strategic partners. We believe that there are some synergies to be derived with partners who share our vision. So that really is the fifth pillar. So those are going to be the 5 areas of focus, with growth through diversification being one of the key areas.
Thanks for that. Hey, Patrick, any more from you?
Sure. Gary, you just talked about diversification. Any chance you guys are looking at expansion outside of Jamaica?
Oh, yes. There are a couple of opportunities that are being pursued right now. They're still very much in the preliminary stages, but we are very excited and we are very optimistic about those opportunities, because while they're still in the preliminary stages, the indications so far have been really very, very positive. And in our vision statement, it's about actually going right throughout the Caribbean. So we have certainly going to be looking at the opportunities outside of the Caribbean, but there are 2 big ones that we are actually pursuing at this point in time. A little bit early to say exactly where they are.
Okay.
All right, thanks for that, Gary. Well, folks, we've come to that point in the program where we'll start to look at some of the Q&A that we have online. So, Gary, let me hit you with the hardest ones first. So, Limitless this podcast says 2030 is almost here. We agree with you. Limitless, it's almost here. Jerome, I think Patrick just beat you to that question. Are there any other projects in the region being considered? So what percentage of WIGTON's turbine value is covered by insurance? So that's the question coming in, Gary. Why don't I throw that one over to you?
Yeah, so there are 2 types of insurances. Business interruption, and that in essence, as I mentioned before, it covers any loss in revenue for all the turbines, except for the portion that is deductible, which is as it is written now, it is 10 days. And we are having, with respect to the damage, again, it's all the turbines, except we have a deductible portion, and we are currently in discussions with the insurers in regard to the specifics around the deductible. We have provided all of the information. The assessors have been on site. And as you can imagine, we have to work through a number of details. They would have to audit and verify figures, and we're still going through that process at this point in time.
Great. That's good to hear, because, again, you and I worked in the T&D business, and we appreciate that JPS has 0 insurance for its T&D assets, but you are able to get insurance for the generation assets, and 0 third-party insurance, I should say. They implemented a self-insurance fund, and I want to say that fund's north of $45 million now, Gary, if my memory serves me correct.
Yes. That's, I think, is what it was before the last storm. So.
Okay, Jerome's asking, have you looked into the opportunity around data centers and potentially arranging for these tech players to come into Jamaica and for you to build a sort of I guess he's hinting at a industrial park or something like that?
Yes, so I think at this point in time, what we want to be sure of is that we are not everything to everyone. One of the important aspects of strategic planning is deciding what you're going to be focusing on based on your key differentiators, based on where you shine over the competitors. And those are the areas that we are focused on. At this point in time, we're going to be focusing on the energy sector, and specifically on renewables and green energy. We're going to be looking at lateral expansion. So it means that we may be looking at areas that are green related and clean related, but not necessarily energy production, such as we have an investment in Flash Motors. That's an electric vehicle company, and we are working closely with that company. But at this point in time, there is no anticipation of investing in data companies. As we grow, we'll open up and look at those various opportunities. But certainly for the next 2 to 3 years, our focus is going to be on renewable energy. We believe that it's a big market, that with the government's policy to be at 50% by 2030, there's just such a lot of opportunities for green energy, for solar, for wind, and also for battery, which is one area that was not included in the 100 megawatt. I believe then that going forward, just based on the need to ensure that the grid is properly regulated and stable, that there's going to be need for batteries going forward. And I think that also represents a growth opportunity for us. So for now, we're going to be focused within the area of renewable energy production.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on the battery in terms of grid reliability. And again, you were part of the JPS team that implemented the only industrial scale battery in Jamaica today. Was it 20 megawatts, I want to say, Gary?
24.5 megawatts.
Sorry, what's the size?
24.5 megawatts. It was a hybrid, and at the time it was the largest hybrid consisting of flywheel as well as battery in the world. I don't think it holds that prestigious position anymore.
Great. And what was the performance of it like over the sort of 2-year period, I want to say, that you were there?
Yeah, it was excellent. I mean, the level of disruptions that we're having on the grid, JPS was having on the grid at the time that I was there, significantly reduced as a result of putting in the batteries. So, if you had a generation failure, or for example, there was some intermittency with the solar that was put on the grid or the wind, the batteries would come in and mitigate any sudden fall off in frequency, thus ensuring a much greater stability to the grid. So it worked very, very well and continues to work well.
Yeah, but I have to say, again, as an analyst, that we really want to see the government promoting renewables and promoting them responsibly. So I love solar and I love wind, but there's a place for all forms of renewables, hydro and waste energy.
Yeah.
And we appreciate that the cost of them, can be quite different. So solar is probably going to be 7 cents, but give you 20% output, and wind may be 12 cents and give you 32%, and waste energy may be 16 cents, but gives you 80% output. You know what I mean? So there's a time and place and space for all of it. And then when we think of the peak demand of the grid, which is between 6 and 9 p.m., we sort of know there are limitations to solar versus wind versus waste energy versus hydro. So there's space for all of it. But for sure, once we're dealing with the intermittent sources of renewables, wind and hydro in particular, wind and solar in particular, you do want to be thinking about, having the generators coming in, bringing batteries as well, even if it's only 30 minutes of backup, right? Because the last 2 days with the rain are perfect examples of where the sun wasn't there for the last 2 days, if you know what I mean. But the wind would have done very well. So you guys on the wind side would have done exceptionally well, but on the solar side, we wouldn't have done well. And folks, this is extremely important, because if you have to turn around and back up the generation that we bring in, the renewable generation, then you end up having a sunk cost, inefficient plants operating with very low capacity factors, and then that's pointless. So we really need to be thinking of batteries, introducing batteries into the generation mix and counting that as a part of the RFP, certainly going forward. I mean, we may get away with the next 168 megawatts without batteries, but thereafter, I think you would agree with me, Gary, once your renewable penetration of the grid gets beyond 22.5%, this becomes a big deal, right, Gary?
Absolutely. That's correct.
Great. Patrick, did I see a question from Chris?
You actually did. The question was, what benefits do you hope to get from advertising or billboards?
Good question. All right. So, we have done our own internal testing of the market out there. And we know traditionally, based on our brand as WIGTON Wind Farm, that the association is really just with wind. So there are a couple of phases in terms of building a brand and the brand attributes and so on. And the phase that we are in right now is awareness, is the awareness stage. And so this first phase of awareness is really about letting the general public, even before we get to the segment side of it, letting the general public know that the name has been changed and that we are a lot more than wind right now, that we are focusing on a diversified portfolio of products and services within the realm of renewables. We have chosen 2 strategic locations, one in Barbican and one on Waterloo Road. That is just a part of presenting the new brand. I should have mentioned, Patrick, that we have just engaged a marketing company, which we have never done before, and they are going to be working on a whole marketing package, a marketing plan for us that is going to see us a lot more visible in the social media arena, as well as some targeted marketing for the specific segments in which we will be focusing on. So it's really the start of the first phase of I want to call it the brand awareness and the change. And then we're going to get into building out the slogan, the specific attributes that we want to be associated with the WIGTON Energy brand going forward.
Yeah, good deal. Thanks for that. And the idea here being, Gary, while today you get all of your income from PPAs and winning bids, a part of the diversification is to be looking at commercial and industrial solutions and selling. So you're trying to get into the business of certainly selling, certainly at the CNI level. Is that sort of vaguely correct?
Absolutely. That
Okay.
is it.
All right.
And that is a part why we are promoting the brand the way we are promoting it.
Good deal. I'm only going to take 2 more questions as we look to sort of wrap up. I love this one. It's coming in from Roger Mallet. I didn't make it up, Gary. Any plan to increase the dividend payouts, Mr. Beryl?
I wonder if you could answer that one for me. So, of course, management is always focused on providing the greatest shareholder value. But we also have to balance that with the long-term viability and the long-term growth of the organization. It means that when it comes to payout, we always have to, through a dividend policy that is really decided by the board, decide how much of our profit we really keep for further investment to enhance shareholder value and how much dividends we pay out. And I believe as it stands right now, we are in pretty good balance. At the end of each period, the board meets, they do an assessment and they make a decision as to what level of payout considering the strategic imperatives of the organization.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. And again, Roger, I want to say again, this stock has increased by 43% in value year to date. So I think WIGTON's done an excellent job in terms of delivering shareholder value from that perspective. And we just had the hurricane, so I think we want to fully assess that. And then we've got 2 big contracts we want to focus on, WIGTON Phase One, and then this new award. So I think in that context, there's a little bit of balancing and juggling going on. But I do think when you think of the performance of this, the performance of the stock in your portfolio, there's the div yield and there's the capital appreciation. And for sure, the capital appreciation has been great. Okay, well, there's some folks, Gary, that want more dividends. I'm perhaps one of them. And I think in the upcoming year, hopefully we'll see some improvement there. But in the meantime, we're really looking forward to just seeing great results, hearing the outcome of the negotiations for WIGTON Phase One's replacement, repowering, hearing the results of the 50 megawatt bid that you have in before the GPE, and just looking to see how under your leadership we're going to transform WIGTON. So really appreciate you being here and taking those hard questions, and we hope to have you back next quarter, so we don't want to scare you away. We want to have you coming back and answering more difficult questions, and we look forward to seeing your results the December period end. We took note of the September numbers and the taxation going away, but we were encouraged by seeing the revenues overall growing and doing well. And I think the business is definitely positioned for growth. So it's, definitely one of my favorite stocks. And again, the only one I have in my portfolio this year, up by 43%. There's not much other stocks out there that will compare. And we look forward to continued capital appreciation next year, and then some improvement on the dividends. So Gary, thanks again for being with us. We really appreciate you.
It's good having been here, and thanks again, Dan, and also Patrick, who just joined.
Good deal. And with that, folks, we're going to bring today's discussion to an end, and I'd like to thank our viewers as usual for tuning in. Your support is always appreciated, and big thanks to Patrick for being beside me here and for sharing his insights as well.
No problem.
Well, I'd like to thank all you folks again. Be sure to look out for updates on our virtual investor forum by following us on social media. We share things, all things forum related, on our social media pages. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Mayberry Investments Limited. And remember, wise investors, slow and steady wins the race. Keep safe now. Bye-bye.